Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Embers of Rebellion. Episode 6. Chapter 48. It was strange having Lucian under my roof, awkward. Everything I usually did for Valerian, he suddenly asked his dad to do. Like cut up his food, I was suddenly no longer needed. He asked for his father when it was his bath time. Most of my afternoon was spent twiddling my thumbs since I only had to heat dinner up. Yet Lucian never once complained and seemed to enjoy his son's constant attention. Even as I went to put Valerian to bed, he asked if his father could tuck him in. I know it was childish, but nights were the only time I got to spend with him, really, so it bothered me more than it should. I was so used to juggling things between Zoe and me that it felt unnatural having someone willingly helping us, ruining our usual routine. I suddenly had time on my hands, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Once Valerian was tucked in bed, Lucian returned to the living room. He scratched the back of his neck before looking at the empty spot beside me on the couch. I rolled my eyes before moving over, and he smiled before coming to sit next to me and draping his arm across the back of it. Finally, Casey is down for the night, Zoe says, coming out in her pajamas while braiding her hair. I had always been envious of how she could do that. I had tried and ended up only making a knotted mess, yet she did it so effortlessly. Zoe comes over and sits down on one of the kids' bean bags, the bag almost swallowing her petite frame as she sinks in it. I'm so tired, she yawns, covering her mouth with her hand. And tomorrow will be worse. We are down 3 staff in the kitchens, 1 in the creche playgroup. 2 waitresses and have a full house, Zoe sighs. Emily must also have the bug. She never showed up for work tonight, I tell her, getting up off the couch and walking over to the bookcase for my folder. I already checked the rosters for tomorrow, Zoe tells me. I sat back down with the folder going to the events diary. I know, we will have to manage. I can work the lunch and night rush if you can handle the kids in the morning, sounds like a plan. I will wake you at 11. If we are still down the next day, we can swap. Macy already pulled doubles 2 days in a row, she says, and I nod. Zoe glances at the diary. What are you looking for? We need to find a date to move the alpha meeting forward, I tell her, but the earliest date I could make work would be 1 week ahead, so instead of 3 weeks, it would be 2. The LZTH? I ask him, and he looks over my shoulder, flicking through the pages before scrubbing his hand down his face. What's wrong with this coming Friday? He asks while looking at the empty slot. That's 6 days away, it wouldn't be enough notice, and I am not sure I can get supplies in early enough, I tell him. Get what you can in. The rest I will organize from one of my hotels and have it sent over. You still want to announce it, right? I nod, best to get it over and done with. Then it has to be the 6th, I can go unseen for a few days, but 2 weeks, the media will come looking for me, he tells me, and I sighed but nodded. Though I am a little shocked it has stayed under wraps already, I am surprised one of your staff haven't sold the story yet, he says, and Zoe glares at him. They aren't staff, they are family, we are all family, we stick together, she says, and Lucian sticks his hands up in the air in surrender. Settle down, you and Macy are the most aggressive rogues I have ever met, geez, he says. Sorry, I am just overtired, she rubbed her eyes before reaching over and grabbing Casey's school jumper off the ground. I also yawned, my eyes feeling like sandpaper, and I regretted taking my pills earlier now that I had to do some planning. I forgot to wash it, Zoe groans. Grab one of Valerian's out for tomorrow, I tell her, and she nods before sniffing it. Her brows pinch together before she suddenly buries her face in it. What is that? Gosh, it smells good. I want to eat it, she says to no one in particular. Lucian raises an eyebrow at her and twirls his finger beside his head, and I chuckle when he mutters, "Cuckoo." What? You smell it then, she snarls, tossing it at his head. I wouldn't want to offend you by sniffing your daughter's jumper, he mocks, and she rolls her eyes. Lucian sniffs it before pulling a face. Ah, yuck. I can't smell anything but Dante, thanks for making me get a whiff of my beta, he says, shaking his head. You can't smell it, Zoe asks. Yeah, I can smell it. It reeks of him, Lucian says, rubbing his nose. I take it from him and sniff it. Yep, definitely your beta, I tell him. Zoe rubs a hand down her face. I must be more tired than I thought. I thought I could smell vanilla bean and fudge, she pouts for a second. Now I want vanilla bean and fudge, she mutters unhappily. Cravings, are you sure you are not pregnant? Lucian laughs. Zoe looks at him, appalled. Not unless I am giving birth to baby batteries or a baby bunny v. Bratter, she spits at him. I chuckled at her while Lucian just blinked, shocked at what she said. Go to bed. I will fill out the order forms, I tell her while laughing. She nods, yawning as she gets to her feet before moving off to her bedroom, muttering about finding some vanilla fudge tomorrow. Night, Zoe, Lucian chuckles, and she flips him off over her shoulder before disappearing down the hall. She is definitely my favorite out of your friends, Lucian states. What's wrong with Macy? Ah, she threatened to castrate me and put me on an ant's nest. Tell me what is right with that one. Who says that, let alone thinks of something like that? I laugh before looking over at the table. Tatum dropped some clothes off for you while you put Valerian to bed. They are on the table, I tell him before reaching over to the coffee and grabbing a pen from the drawer. I sit back, pulling the order forms out to fax off tomorrow. Lucian gets up and rummages through the bag Tatum dropped off. Can I borrow your shower? You can't borrow it, but you can use it, I tell him. I peeked up at him, and he had a silly grin on his face, and my lips tugged in the corners. Towels are in the hallway, Valerian showed me earlier, he says and walks off down the hall while I turn my attention back to my task. Lucian, her shower was tiny, and every time I turned or moved, I was knocking crap down off the shower caddy or smashing my elbows on the walls. Getting in, I nearly knocked myself out of the shower head, it was that low, and why was everything pink? Pink shampoo, pink soap, pink shower curtain, and floor mats, it was like a pink explosion in here. I didn't pick her for a girly girl. I should have used the kids' bathroom, not the joint one between Zoe and Marin's room. Turning back to the task at hand, I grab the pink loofah and sniff it. It smelled of Marin, so the fluffy pom-pom pink thing must be Zoe's. I was bending down under the shower head trying to wash the shampoo out when I heard the door open and thought at first it was Marin until I listened to the mention of fudge mumbled, and I froze. That wasn't Marin. Remind me to ring Emily tomorrow to check on her, she sings out. I froze, wondering what she was doing before I heard that she was peeing. Were they that comfortable peeing in front of each other? Then again, Dante and I were close, and he had no care about taking a leak in front of me. Marin? She asked. I said nothing before suddenly the shower curtain was ripped back, and we made eye contact. Her weary gaze goes to my shocked one, and her eyes widen when she screams, scaring the crap out of me, and I grasped the shower curtain, trying to shut it while she tries to cover herself where she was sitting on the toilet peeing. The shower curtain was flimsy as I yanked it closed only for it to rip off, and the motion caught me off guard. I lost my footing on the slippery surface. I somehow ended up sprawled out on the floor, my legs spread in a very inappropriate manner, exposing me to a very horrified Zoe, and my head bent awkwardly in the corner of the shower. I thought I can see you. I can see it all, I want to unsee it, Zoe shrieks, covering her eyes. Marin! She calls out. SHH, SHH, stop, don't call her in here, I choke out, trying to unwedge myself. How embarrassing and awkward. We made eye contact, while both of us were in a very vulnerable state. What, are you all right? Oh, you're bleeding, I will get Marin, she gushes, about to run from the room, but I moved, grabbing her ankle as she went to dart out. I'm fine, let's just never speak of this moment again, I gasp, my back ling, and I reach behind me before pulling out a pink back scrubber that was digging into my rear. I dropped it on the floor before looking up at Zoe who was staring at the ceiling. You good dude, alive? Just great, I tell her, covering myself with the torn shower curtain. Nice chat, she says, quickly closing the door. I stumble out of her death trap shower and over to the mirror. The corner of my ear was bleeding and running down the side of my face. I clean it up before drying and putting on some boxers. We'll add that memory to the most awkward situation file in my head. Man, I can never look that girl in the eye again. Walking out, Marin is passed out on the couch. Her mouth was wide open and her head bent back awkwardly, and I sighed, relieved when I realized we hadn't woke her. Scooping her up, she didn't even wake, making me wonder how much she actually works since she could sleep through all that noise I just made and Zoe screaming. Walking up the hall, I stopped when Valerian called out as I passed his door. Are you sleeping in here, Dad? He asks, rubbing his eyes. Go back to sleep. I will be here in the morning when you wake up. His eyes move to his mother in my arms. Can I sleep with you and Mum? He asks, suddenly brightening up excitedly, and I look down at Marin. I was planning on sleeping on the couch because Valerian's bed was way too small, but if Valerian is in there, maybe she won't mind? Please? He whispers, but he is already climbing out of bed. Okay, but be quiet, we don't to wake your mother, Mum could sleep through a tornado. The only thing that wakes her is her alarm once she is asleep. Aunt Macy let off an air horn once, and she didn't even move, yet her alarm wakes her. He shrugs, walking ahead and pushing the door open. Really? I asked him. Yep, probably the MN that Grandma Val gave her. She takes them sometimes when she can't sleep. She took them just before dinner, Valerian says as I place her down on the bed. I thought she took Panadol, so this was news to me, yet she did give me a funny look when I caught her popping pills like she was caught doing something she shouldn't be doing. Valerian climbs in the middle, tugging the blankets up. Grandma Val works here. I ask him, climbing in beside him. No, she died when I was a baby. She gave us the hotel to build our village, Valerian says, yawning. He places his head on my chest and snuggles closer. If you were a baby, how do you know she gave them to your mum? Because I heard Aunt Zoe and Aunt Macy arguing with Mum over her taking them, something about them making her infertile. They said Grandma told her to take them only sometimes if the pain is too bad because they have wolfsbane in them, and she shouldn't spend her life numb. I stared up at the ceiling feeling guilty. Wolfsbane was poison to werewolves, but it also had medicinal properties in low doses, like pain relief because it led the nerves and paralyzed you temporarily, yet too much could k.llu. What does infertile mean? Valerian asks. I don't answer and just ask another question. And your mum doesn't take them all the time? I ask him, and he shakes his head. No, Aunt Zoe banned them from the house, but she has a secret stash in the pantry. I saw her grab them out earlier while Zoe wasn't looking. She keeps them in the sultanas box. Zoe hates sultanas, and so does Casey. I glance over at Marin passed out cold. Get some sleep, I tell Valerian kissing his head. Love you, Dad, Valerian mumbles. Love you too, I tell him. Tomorrow I would find that stash and confront her, I thought to myself as my eyes closed. Chapter 49. Marin. I woke up to pee during the night and realized Valerian was in my bed. However, it was the body beside him that made me tense. No wonder my back was killing with Valerian resting in the center of my back. Shaking my head, I quickly raced to the bathroom. I never usually woke up at night and would remain asleep until my alarm woke me. So I was a little disorientated as I walked back to the room. Glancing at the alarm clock that resided on the bedside table, I noted that it was a little after 3 a.m. Why was I awake? In the pit of my stomach, I knew it was the bond, the dull throbbing ache of him being around for so long and the bond trying to pull me near and wanting me to seek him out. I even took one of my pills, hoping the incessant niggling pains would dissipate. I knew they would come on, they always did after seeing him, even if it was only for a few minutes, plus I was worried I would sleepwalk and crawl into wherever he slept. The ache and need to see your mate was ridiculous. Bonds were far from a blessing. I would consider the bond to be more of a curse. It was irrational and illogical. Moon Goddess really screwed werewolves over with that inbuilt setting in our DNA, as if breaking every bone in our body to shift wasn't bad enough, we didn't even get a say in who our mates were, and we are as good as DD if we didn't accept them. Lucian was turned facing Valerian, Valerian's head resting on his arm next to Lucian's face. I carefully pulled the blanket back up as I climbed back into bed, not wanting to disturb them. They both looked pretty peaceful. I eventually drifted back off, but not for long when I felt the bed move. I jolted upright, still caught in my dream of Forsaken taking Valerian from me. I tried to shake the remnants of the dream away to look over at the clock and see I had only been asleep for 20 minutes. What? Movement makes me look over at Valerian to see he had climbed out of bed. What's wrong? Are you okay? Lucian asks as Valerian climbs over him to get out of bed. I'm just using the bathroom, Valerian mumbles, half asleep before walking out of the room. My dream was still fresh. I found myself following him, now paranoid about the Forsaken getting in my house and stealing him. He shuts the door, and I lean on the wall yawning. Why couldn't I sleep? I have to do a double tomorrow, I need to sleep. I debated whether or not it would be worth taking another pill, but they also gave me terrible heartburn for the first half an hour after taking them. The wolf's bane was not a pleasant ingredient in them. I hear the toilet flush, and Valerian opens the door rubbing his eyes and yawning before walking off in the opposite direction toward his room. Val? He stops and looks up at me through his half-lidded eyes. He was not coherent at all as he yawned. Don't you want to sleep in my room? I ask him, knowing his father was in there. No, you keep kicking me, he mumbles, turning around, walking into his room, and climbing into his bed. I tuck him in, tucking the surrounding blankets over him before kissing his head. I didn't know what to do with myself now. I checked all the windows and locks before rechecking them to ensure I didn't imagine checking them, anxiety at its finest. I debated what to do. I could climb in with Valerian, but he said I woke him from kicking him. I sighed before heading back out to the hall. I paused as I went to head out to the couch. Every part of my body told me I was going in the wrong direction, trying to lead me back to my bed where Lucian was. I knew the bond would get stronger, and now I marked him, but this was ridiculous, making me wonder what would happen tomorrow when he wasn't here. Would it get worse with him further away? Would the pain get worse? My mind and body fought against one another before my body won, my feet carrying me back to my room while I mentally scolded myself for letting them. Lucian had moved, now more in the center of the bed where Valerian was. I can sleep on the couch if Valerian isn't coming back in. Is that why you were pacing in the hall, or did you go retake one of your pills? Lucian said while yawning. Pacing? I didn't realize I was pacing. I felt like I was losing my mind. I swallowed. I knew I should tell him to go sleep on the couch. Marin? No, it's fine, I mutter. It's fine? Lucian says, sitting up on one elbow and looking at me. I pull the blanket back, climbing back into the bed. My entire body was awake now, every part of me twitchy and antsy. I clench my hands into fists to stop myself from trying to touch him. What is wrong with me? The pain I was used to, but feeling him so near was making my heart rate increase, my breathing faster as I soaked up his scent that perfumed the room. I feel him lay back down, getting comfortable behind me. He sighed loudly. Valerian told me what those pills were you were taking. I say nothing and look at the ceiling. That kid was far too observant for his age, he is like a sponge absorbing everything he sees and hears. Why did you take them? Valerian said for pain, but I am not sleeping with anyone. Are you addicted to them? Did he seriously just ask me that? I haven't got time to scratch me half the time, let alone time to have an addiction on top of my never-ending responsibilities. I'm not addicted to them, I answer. Are you sure we can get you help? I am not judging if you are, Lucian, I am not addicted to them, I don't take them all the time, only when you, well, you know, and lately when I see you. What do you mean? The bond. I didn't want to give more reason to be around or use it as an excuse. Are you going to finish what you were going to say? I rub a hand down my face. When I see you, it's worse than when I don't. The bond recognizes you, tells me to claim you so you can't be with them, but you have claimed me now, Marin, yes, and now the urge to be near you is even worse, and it hasn't even been 8 hours, my tone came out harsher than I intended. But thinking the words and saying them were vastly different. Saying them made anger in me at how weak I sounded. I wasn't weak. And that's it, that is the only reason? Yes, Lucian. I am not addicted to my pills, you don't, I squeaked when he moved and grabbed me, rolling me as he slid his arm under my head and pulled me closer. His scent invades my nostrils before I feel him rest his chin on my head. I inhaled his scent, the dull ache instantly stamped down, and I felt my body relax, almost going utterly limp in his arms. I press my nose into the base of his throat. His stubble brushed my forehead, and a rather embarrassing noise left my lips. Better? He asked, and I froze mid-sniff. He chuckles, his chest rumbling, and I go to pull my face from his neck, and he growls. I asked if it was better, didn't ask you to move, Marin, he whispered, tugging me closer. Within seconds I was asleep when he started purring, lulling my waking mind into blissful contentedness. Lucian, I got up to the sounds of Zoe getting the kids ready for school. I went to sit up and slide out from under Marin when Valerian came bounding into the room excitedly. Zoe was hot on his heels as she tried to stop him. Valerian, no, mummy is sleeping, Zoe whispered yelled, but it was too late as the door smacked into the wall with a loud bang. Marin, however, did not wake up. I twisted out from under her, and Valerian, seeing me moving, raced over while Zoe blinked at me. "You're in bed, I thought you left," very observant, and yes, I am still here, I tell her as Valerian climbs in my lap before I even have a chance to get up. "Are you taking me to school?" I looked over at Marin, still passed out as she moved closer in her sleep, burying her face in the pillow I was using. "No, Valerian, your father isn't dressed, and we are running late," Zoe says, coming over and plucking him off my lap. I glance at the clock on the bedside table, and so does Valerian, he would be nearly an hour early. "We don't need to leave until it says 8:30, Zoe," he says, his brows furrowing. "We will be late to get breakfast on the way from McDonald's if we don't leave now," she says, hauling him out. Zoe winks at me, and I scrub a hand down my face, trying to wake up. "Zoe." She stops at the door and looks over at me. "Don't forget to ring Emily," I tell her, and she glares at me. Her lips pressed into a line. If a look could kill, Zoe would have murdered me. I chuckle as she leaves, taking Valerian with her. I hear the kids making demands for their McDonald's breakfast as they leave before laying back down. Marin instantly slid her way back over to me and tossed her leg over my waist before nestling her face back into my neck. Gripping her GH, I haul her top of me, and I hear her sigh making me laugh softly. She will probably kill me, but she wasn't complaining right now. I managed to go back to sleep before waking up to wandering hands roaming over my stomach and chest. I blink up at the ceiling to see her half on top of me still. Her head fell back on my arm, and I swallowed at the sight of her neck. So tempting, and it would be so easy to mark her while she was like this. I roll on my side and skim my nose across her neck and shoulder. Marin had a spicy floral scent. My mouth waters as I inhale deeply before running my tongue over her neck before freezing. Recognition smashed into me as I gave into instinct, and I quickly ripped my face away from her neck, feeling my canines pressing into my lips. I take a deep breath before untangling myself from her. I needed to get away from her while she was in this state before I did something that would make her hate me. My stomach twisted as I forced myself out of the room. Needing a distraction, I flick the kettle on and start picking up toys and clothes that must be from this morning. Hours passed when I finally looked up, having completely forgotten about the coffee I intended to make. I had managed to clean the entire tiny apartment. I curse under my breath. Was it weird I cleaned her place? Would she find it insulting? Would Zoe? I pull a chair out from under the table, attempting to make a slight mess so it doesn't look so clean, but all I could smell was bleach, tasted in the back of my mouth. The washing machine makes a noise singing loudly as the spin cycle finishes, and I walk away to put it in the dryer before stopping. I needed to put the chair back straight. Maybe I am slightly compulsive, but I had reason to be. I needed the distraction, so I didn't walk in there and mark her against her will. I realign the chair, my nervousness making it challenging to stop. Passing Valerian's room, I rechecked it, but his room was spotless. I placed the clothes in the dryer, turning it on before chucking another load on, but it was only half a load. I quickly look around, trying to find more clothes. Stopping at Marin's door, I push it open. I need to clean it, I run my fingers over her dresser. When was the last time she dusted? I flick my hand, ridding it of the dust before scooping up her work clothes and sniffing them to see if they had her scent on them or not. She had so many uniforms scattered around her room. She moved on the bed, and I glanced at her, but she was still asleep. Scooping up another handful of clothes that were on my side of the bed, I sniff them when she clears her throat. I glance at her mid-sniff to find her staring at me. She blinks at me and rubs her eyes, sitting up. "What are you doing?" she asks. "Ah, washing," I tell her, holding up the pieces I just grabbed off the floor that fell under the bed. My eyes dart to what was in my hand. I blinked. "Does that require you to sniff my panties and cami?" she asks before reaching over and snatching them from my grip. My eyes widen. I was seeing if they were clean. Well, were they, Mr. Sniffer? I clear my throat. Standing upright. Well, this got awkward fast. I swear, I was not sniffing them in a sordid way. See, I have an armful. I just came in here to see if any needed washing. God, that sounded lame even to my own ears, not sniffing her panties in a sordid way. Who says that? Did you sniff Zoe's panties too? She says, pointing to the clothes under my arm. What? No, I just grabbed these out of the hamper in the bathroom. I'm playing Lucian, she chuckles, tossing her panties and cami to me. I let out a breath. But if you are looking for a job, I am seeking a nanny, she laughs. Ha, very funny. Wait, really? I could be a nanny, maybe pappy. Nanny sounds a little feminine, but I would if it meant spending more time here. No, but hey, you want to clean. One less thing for me to do, she says, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Coffee? She asks, and I nod, scooping up a dress from the back of her chair. Marin moves to the kitchen while I go to the tiny laundry and put another load of washing on. Did you sort out my pantry? She asks as I walk back into the living room/kitchen dining room. I say nothing, feeling awkward suddenly. Where is the coffee? She asks, rummaging around. I walk over to her, reaching past her, and she jumps when I press against her back. I grab the coffee jar and sugar. Right here, I retrieve the 2 canisters. Ah, we have been meaning to use those, she says. I found the decorative canisters still in the box, a whole heap of Tupperware still in the wrappers like they brought them and forgot about them. Marin turns around. Excuse me, she says, squeezing past me. She grabs 2 mugs, and I lean on the counter, watching her. I got rid of your pills in the Sultana box, I tell her, and her hand stops mid-air. You what? You don't need them, Lucian, you can't just throw things out. Valerian said Zoe banned them from the house, so you could either accept it and ring me when you need me, or you can tell Zoe they are in the house and I will give them back, I tell her, folding my arms across my chest. She growls, and I raise an eyebrow at her. Is that a purr or a growl? A little hard to tell, she glares at me. So, what will it be? She turns back to make the coffee. Or I could just stay here, or we can alternate between both places. I was going to ask if I could take Valerian for the weekend anyway. Lucian, you don't even have a room for him set up or anything for a child at your place. I will go get some stuff or send Dante too. I can look after our son Marin, I will think about it. We have the Alpha meeting on Friday, maybe the weekend after, she says, sliding a coffee over to me. Why not this weekend? Lucian, we are about to publicly announce we are mates, and that will change things for Valerian. I don't want too much to change, then stay with him. I am not staying at your place. Besides, I have to work, then he will be fine with me, or I stay here. Either way, I am seeing my son on the weekend, so choose, I argue. She ignores me, walking back to her room to get ready for work. I follow, sitting on her bed. Ah, what are you doing? Finishing our conversation, it can wait, I need to get ready, then get ready. I thought women could multitask, or can't you talk and get dressed at the same time? She growls at me, but I refuse to leave even when she glares at me as I get comfortable on the bed and watch her. Lucian, out. So, the weekend. She snarls while snatching clothes off the hanger. Chapter 50. Marin. It took ages for me to get rid of Lucian. Lucian had been pestering me all by day about taking Valerian for the weekend. He finally agreed to leave if he could get Valerian from school and take him somewhere after school. I decided to agree so I could get some work done because once again, we were down more staff, and to make matters worse, no one could get a hold of Emily, and apparently, her son also didn't show up for school. However, when it was nearly 6 p.m., I began to worry when Zoe hadn't messaged me to say Valerian had been dropped to her like promised for dinner. Walking back to my office after dinner rush started to slow down. I pulled my phone from my pocket about to ring Lucian when I smacked into someone. Looking up, I find it was Dante. Seriously, I have been looking for you everywhere, he said, shaking his head. Ah, okay. Why? But more importantly, do you know where Lucian is with my son? At home, I think. He sent me to watch you for the night, I growl, shoving past him and heading toward my office. Only when I got there I could hear banging inside the room and some strange noises. I push my office door open, wondering who is inside before stopping dead in my tracks at the sight before me. Dante walks in behind me and bumps into me before freezing also. Looking up at Dante, his mouth had fallen open in shock, and he glances at me before suddenly covering my eyes. I slap his hand away, about to back out of the room quietly. When Dante, of course, makes awkward by clearing his throat and drawing attention to the fact we were in the room. My plan was to back away slowly and pretend I did not just see one of my best friends bent over my desk with her pants around her ankles while Tatum was pounding into her. They both jumped, and I tried to bail out, but Dante was blocking the door with his huge body. I glance everywhere but at the pair of them, while Dante has no issues openly staring at them. I elbow him while poor Macy, who looked mortified at being busted, scrambled to put her clothes on. You should really put a sock on the door or maybe just lock it, Dante taunts. Tatum clears his throat, yanking his pants up. We were filing and, Tatum glances at Macy. And tripped and fell into her, it happens all the time? I hate when that happens, Dante finishes for him while shaking his head laughing. Filing? Do I look cabinet, you? Macy growls. If you were, I would definitely stick my files in you, Tatum says as Macy buttons up her blouse. She growls at him. Next time, can you pick a room and not my desk? I ask, still not looking at them. I would definitely be taking some sanitizer to that desk later. Maybe even buy another. I don't think I will ever look at it again same without seeing Macy bent over it. I thought you knocked off at 4. I asked her. I did, but Tatum asked for help. Wait, why are you still here? I haven't left, Tatum says. Jenny didn't show up? Tatum shakes his head and shrugs. Jenny wasn't on today, Blair was, and she never showed. I tried ringing her, and that was when I met. She glances at Tatum. Your friend, did you get a hold of Emily? Zoe tried this morning and couldn't. Macy asks, and I shake my head. No, I was about to go over there and check on her, maybe Blair caught the bug too? Macy said, but this was getting too strange. I had managed to lose 2 receptionists in 2 days, and multiple staff was already sick. Okay, Ring Jenny and see if she can fill in, I am heading over to the commune, I tell Macy, who picks up the phone. Valerian, I thought. Pulling my phone out, I quickly dialed Lucien's phone, which was switched off. I growl and look at Dante. Mind link your alpha and ask where my son is. If you let him mark you, you could mind link him yourself, Dante taunts, and I roll my eyes before watching his eyes glaze over. I waited when he sighed. He said he is taking Valerian for the night, Dante tells me, and I press my lips in a line before walking out to the car park. I would pick him up on the way home. Only when I get out there, I curse, realizing I don't have a car thanks to Lucian, and turn around to head back home to see if I could borrow Zoe's. Only when I turn around, do I smack into Dante again. What are you doing? I asked him, seeing that he was following me. Coming with you, he says. You are not staying at my place, go home and, wait, have you got a car, yet, you think I walked here good, you are taking me to the rogue commune, I tell him, looking for his car. I spot the shiny, sleek sports car and start marching over to it. Is that where your friend lives? Dante asks, chasing me to keep up. Yes, she isn't answering her phone, and her son never showed up for school, I tell him as he unlocks his car. I climb in the passenger seat before sending Zoe a message that I would get Valerian and that I was going to check on Emily. Dante drove me insane the entire drive there, the man could talk the leg off an iron pot. And what was up with his music selection? It sounded like a kid's musical in here. What the heck are you listening to? I ask. Trolls soundtrack, it is catchy, do you like it? No. I tell him. Casey downloaded it on my Spotify, what is up with you sniffing her, by the way? And I would stay the HL away from Zoe. She wants your head on a silver platter, I warn him. Yet, Lucian told me on the way to the school at lunchtime, said she really good. I only wanted to know what washing powder she used, a bit of an overreaction if you ask me, Dante sighed. You wouldn't think that if you had her upbringing, she spent the majority of her childhood in youth homes, she met some creeps in her time, I tell him. Is that how she had Casey? He asked, and I shook my head. No, and what were you and Lucian doing at the school at lunchtime, getting Valerian to take him to the birth registry, excuse me? Lucian, got him DNA tested and changed his last name? He what? I growled. You didn't know? No, I didn't, Dante looks away awkwardly, drumming his on the steering wheel. I thought you knew Lucian had a blood sample taken the night he found out before you got there, why would he need to have his DNA tested? We can tell our own kin, yet, but the birth registry would need it. They can't tell if Valerian is his or not, Dante shrugs. I thought he told you he was taking Valerian from school, yes, picking him up after not kidnapping him and changing his name, I am going to kill him, I growled as we pulled into the commune. Driving in blue and red lights made us slow down, and Officer Richards waved for us to stop as we pulled in. We were in a pretty secluded area at the back of the commune, so there wasn't any reason for them to be out here. Only Emily and her son lived out here because her neighbors kept complaining about the smell of her vegetable garden, so she moved to the other side of the commune away from everyone. Dante rolled down his window, and Officer Richards came over and peered in the window. Beta, Marin, Officer Richards said. What is going on? I asked him. School sent us out to do a welfare check on a woman called Emily and her son. Apparently, neither showed up to the school today, she did the morning reading group, I nod. Emily always did 2 days a week at the school, one day for canteen duty, the other for reading group. So you spoke with her? I asked. You know her? Yeah, she works at my hotel. I was coming to check on her. Officer Richards runs a hand down his face. Her place is a mess, and there are signs of a struggle. Forensics are in there now taking blood samples. Forensics were taking blood samples. I blink, thinking of the last time I saw Emily or her son. Blood samples? Yeah, the place is pretty messed up. She put a fight, but we can't find any sign of her or her son. Forsaken? Unsure, maybe, but we found a dead one not far into the forest. You reported it to Lucian? No, we tried, can't reach him, but Alpha John is on his way out, said he would stop by and grab Alpha Callan. Strange seeing them two talking, Officer Richards says. Dante nods, and so do I. My brows furrow, wondering why my father was interested in missing rogues. I will let Lucian know tomorrow. Let us know if you find anything, Dante says. I wondered briefly if Callan would tell my father about Lucian and me, but doubted it. However, I was interested in why those two were so buddy right now. Officer Richards goes to leave before stopping and coming back to the window. He leaned in, looking at me, but I was still stuck on the fact my receptionist was missing and her son. Also, Marin, you might want to give Zoe a heads up. I look over at him. Pardon, Amber found out about Casey, think she will cause issues. Officer Richards shrugs. No idea, but she wasn't happy. I sigh and nod. I will let Zoe know. I'm sorry, Marin. Why are you sorry? They are filing for custody of Casey. What? Don't worry, we will back Zoe up. She is a good girl, and honestly, Amber is just being spiteful. I curse, shaking my head. Zoe was going to freak out. Tell your son to back off and pull his mad in line. They come after Zoe or Casey, there will be issues. I will speak with him, but you know what the courts are like. He already filed, and Zoe is a rogue. That says nothing about her ability to parent, I tell him. Officer Richards nods sadly. Which court did he file in? His mates, Shadow Pack. Alpha John's pack. I was hoping he would have said Lucian's pack. Wait, she is from Shadow Pack? Ah yes, she is the Beta's daughter. I blink at him, racking my brain for the name. Wait, Amber Zimmer? Yeah, do you know her? Yeah, I went. Dante elbows me, and I realize I was about to admit going to school with her. She was one of Ava's best friends. We should go. I need to get Marin over to Alpha. Lucian is to pick up Valerian. Oh yes, Callan told me it was being announced at the Alpha meeting when I rang him. The pack will be stoked that Lucian finally found his mate, once they get over the shock of his mate being a rogue. Ah, well, yes, but the pack will love you, Officer Richards says. I doubted that but sighed. Well, we should go, keep us updated, Dante says, winding his window up and turning the car around. Lucian s? Yes, then I need to go break the news to Zoe, I tell him, and he nods. She can fight it, Dante tells me. She is rogue, and the custody case will be heard in my father's pack. Dante seems to think for a second. You think he would interfere? I know he will if he finds out she is my friend. He nods, and we drive to Lucian's. Chapter 51. Dante drove me to Lucian's hotel. I noticed the strange looks I received as I stepped out of his car. I waited for him before following him inside the grand place. People stared openly, and I rolled my eyes and fought the urge to tell them off. I stabbed the elevator button with my finger a little too viciously in my annoyance. Dante raises an eyebrow at me before smirking and shaking his head. Looking around the foyer while we waited, I made eye contact with a few people who stared in shock at seeing a rogue. Anyone would think I had two heads with the way they stared, like I was some mutant. I stared back until they looked away. Not trying to cause trouble at all, Dante says, clicking his tongue. I am not the problem they are, I tell him, and he nods. It won't be an issue soon, it shouldn't be an issue at all, Dante sighs. There was no point in getting into an argument over whose views were right or wrong. The elevator doors open, and I step inside. Dante pulls a key from his pocket, placing it in the keyhole and twisting it before pressing the button to the penthouse. I tapped my foot impatiently, and Dante bristled. I take it you are not happy with your mate, Dante chuckles. No, I am ecstatic he changed my son's name without asking, that he pulled him from school earlier than he said he would and that he didn't return my son like agreed. That was sarcasm, right? I huff, annoyed. When the doors open on the top floor, I head straight toward his door, ignoring the startled warriors lining the hall. Before I could knock on it, the door opened, and Lucian took a step back as I pointed at him. How dare you? You had no right to change his name or kidnap him. Is this supposed to make me trust you? I bellowed at him, jabbing him in the chest. He snatches my hand in his tight grip before jerking me closer and surprising me by pecking my lips before I could stop him. Good afternoon to you too, mate, he says with a laugh before letting go and walking off down the hall into the living room. I hear the door close as Dante walks in behind me. I stalked after Lucian angrily. That's it, you aren't going to say anything, I demanded. Nothing to say, I didn't do anything wrong, Marin. He is my son, and I can look after him for the night. I'm talking about changing his name, Lucian, and you know it. Coffee? What? No, I am here to collect my son and leave. He is asleep, so keep your voice down, and secondly, I need your signature to change his name, he says, pointing to some documents in front of me. I collected the paperwork for change of name and showed proof of DNA, but I need your signature to change it. My bad, bro. I told her you done it, Dante says walking in. Do you not pay attention? Lucian growled at him. Surprised, you didn't just pay them off to change it. I snap at him. It did cross my mind, he admits. There is a pen, he says, pointing to it beside the documents. I haven't agreed, Lucian. Well, you can break his heart then and explain why he can't have my name too. I ask, looking down at the paperwork. I read over it to see he had hyphenated his name, changing it to Summers Solace. I chewed my lip, suddenly embarrassed at my ranting. I wasn't trying to get rid of you, Marin. I just wanted it to say he was mine too. He places a mug in front of me before picking up the pen and handing it to me. So please sign it. I take the pen from him, looking at the ridiculously long name. He talks to Dante while I read over all the documentation before crossing out Summers and adding my ID number and signature. I couldn't believe I had just removed my name from his documents. Well, technically, it wasn't my birth name, but still. Lucian takes the documents and glances at them before seeing I scribbled out my last name. So, just Solace? Just take it before I change my mind, I tell him. Why, I thought for sure you would carry on over your name being removed, because it looks ridiculous, and I don't want him known as Alphabet with a name that long. Imagine spelling that every time. He appears to think for a second before humming in agreement. Now, my son? Room to the left of mine, he says, pointing down the hall. He talks with Dante while I wandered down the hall to get Valerian. I stopped next to the door before looking back at Lucian and pointing to it. not wanting to accidentally walk into his without permission. He nodded, and I twisted the handle before entering. It was not at all what I expected to find. However, I was shocked to see the Galaxy wall decor stickers. For years, I had wanted to decorate his room, but he liked everything plain and simple. I once placed dinosaur pictures on his walls, and Valerian chucked the biggest tantrum and said I ruined a perfectly good wall. So I was shocked to see his bedroom actually resemble a kid's room and not some showroom that looked like it was never lived in. The light fighting was a moon. Stars covered the walls from his projection nightlight, sitting on the bedside table. Just let him stay one night, Lucian said behind me, making me jump. When did you do all this? Today, Valerian helped. He let you decorate it? Yes, he even helped me pick. He wanted a room like mine, he chuckles. You have stars on walls? I laugh. No, I have grown out of that now. I also sleep with the light off, too. I am officially a big boy, he chuckles, and I elbow him. No, I was telling him about my room when I was a kid while we were at the store. I watched him pick out the most boring stuff for a kid I have ever seen, Lucian says before shaking his head. You mean like his room at home? You said it, not me. I roll my eyes before moving toward his bed. His bedspread also had the Galaxy on it. Leaning down, I kiss him, tucking his blanket up higher. With a sigh, I stood up before turning to look at Lucian. One night, and he has to go to school. If I get a phone call tomorrow saying he isn't at school, it will be the last time, Lucian, I warn him. Lucian beams like all his Christmases came at once. I shook my head, going to see if Dante would run me home when Lucian stepped into my path. Chapter 52. I had every intention of coming over here and dragging my son out and beating this stupid man senseless, though I probably would have needed help to do such a thing, and it all backfired. Stay, I will sleep on the couch, Lucian says, gripping my arm. You would sleep on your own couch? I scoff. Wouldn't be the first time. Also, pretty sure I have passed out on the floor more times than I count, he says. No, I have to go see Zoe anyway. Call her and stay. The hotel will survive without you for one night. I don't even have clothes here. I own a washing machine and dryer. I also know how to use them. Ha, very funny. You're probably a better cleaner than I am with your OCD. But I don't think that is a good idea. I can't, I sighed, rubbing my temples. Since when did my life become so complicated? I had so much going on. The alpha meeting was in a few days. My employees were missing, the rest sick. Now the drama with Casey's father, and now I had to fight my bond every second the day. I felt like my grasp on control was slowly slipping. Everything is being thrown out of whack. I don't want to confuse Valerian more than he already is. What do you mean? We are about to announce to the city we are mates, Marin? How would you being here confuse him? He asks, leading me out of the room and into the hall. He shuts Valerian's door before stopping to look at me. How does he not get it? Yes, exactly, announcing we are mates, but that's it. I don't want him thinking we are suddenly a family like everyone else. It is different, you are making this different. To me, it is straightforward. I am yours, and you are mine. That's what mates are, Marin. We are supposed to be together, so why do you keep BL00DY fighting it? I don't bother answering. Instead, I go look for Dante. I sent him home, Lucian calls out behind me. You sent him home? Yes, because I hoped you would stay. I don't want to stay, Lucian. I don't know how I can make it much clearer, you know what your issue is. You are so used to being in control. You call me OCD, and yet have you looked at yourself? Excuse me, I am nothing like you. I didn't for years. I sure didn't ask for your God help, that boy in there, I raised him on my own. While you stuck in the city and spent the last few years drunk out of your brain, we are nothing alike, I snap at him. I have apologized, I can't change it, or I would. So stop throwing it in my face every 2 seconds. I am trying to make this work while all you do push me away. I know, but you could have done more too, don't put all the blame on me, done more? You kicked me off your territory, I tried telling you over the phone, and you laughed at me. My private life is far from private, Marin. There were plenty of events in the city where you could have come right up to me with him, and I would have recognized him. You could have sent me the DNA tests or counter-ordered them. You make out I am a drunk. He pauses for a second. He appeared to be thinking before he shrugged. Well, I was, but I wasn't drunk every second of every day. I still had obligations to the pack and city. Don't tell me there was nothing else you could have done. And the reason you didn't was that meant you ran the risk of losing him, so don't put the blame entirely on me. You hate me, I get it, but you also could have found another way, and your hate towards me is why you didn't. I blink at him when Valerian's voice reaches my ears. Mummy! Valerian murmurs, making Lucian spin around to face the hall. Why is everyone yelling? I went to pick him up when Lucian did before I got the chance. Come on, I will tuck you back in, you have school in the morning, Lucian whispers to him, kissing his head. Stay or don't. I am done arguing. My keys are on the bench if you want to leave, Lucian says while walking off with a sleepy Valerian in his arms. I could hear him murmuring to him before I turned around, walking into the kitchen to look for his keys. I snatched them up, intending to leave, when I stopped when I heard Valerian was crying in the room. Moving down the hall, I stopped near his door, listening to Lucian try to calm him. Wondering if I should intervene. I don't want to stay if Mummy can't. Does she think I don't want her because I wanted to stay here? You don't have to make her leave. Valerian sobbed. My head clenched at his words. Did he think I blamed him or his father? I was the one trying to leave. I went to walk in when Lucian's voice stopped me. Your mother is angry with me, not you. She will come back. Daddy did the wrong thing, that's all, but she is leaving and not taking me with her. Why wouldn't she stay? Do you want me to take you home? Lucian asked him. But I want to stay here too. Peeking in the door, Lucian rubs his face. I am right here. I am not going anywhere, I tell him before Lucian no doubt tries to retake the blame. Maybe he was right? Perhaps I could have done more, or maybe it was the bond making me think that, or the fact Valerian was upset. Although, I always noticed when events were held in the city. We made sure not to organize events on the same weekends. He wasn't wrong about that part, he was a part of many events where I could have approached him. Moving into the room, Lucian looks at me before looking at Valerian. See, she is right here, and you will stay? Valerian asks, and I look at his father before nodding. I will stay, I just need to ring on to Zoe. I will be here when you wake up, I tell him. Quickly leaning down, I peck his cheek. Go to sleep. It's late, I tell him. Valerian snuggles underneath his blanket. I watch as his father gives him a kiss before I walk out of the room. I walk into the living room and sit on the couch, pinching the bridge of my nose. Lucian was still in his room, and I sent Zoe a message to see if she was still up. I waited for a reply, but I figured she was asleep when I didn't get one. I would tell her tomorrow. It probably wasn't a good idea to tell her over the phone, Plus I knew she wouldn't sleep once I told her. Are you ringing, Zoe? Lucian asks, walking out and stopping next to me. He falls on the couch beside me. You didn't have to take the blame, I tell him. He will find out eventually anyway. You're right, I could have found other ways to tell you, he nods. Well, I know now, he says with a sigh before getting up. I will get you some clothes to sleep in unless you are sneaking off. I can distract him until you get back in the morning. I told him I would stay. I will stay on the couch, I tell him. He goes to say something but I cut him off. Your apartment, Lucian, I will sleep on the couch, I tell him, and he purses his lips but nods before walking off. He returned with some clothes and a towel before pointing me in the direction of the bathroom. Everything in his bathroom was so clean and white. Undressing, I stepped in and turned the shower dials. Seriously, who has dials? Water sprayed out like a blasting me in the face and I placed my hands up shielding my eyes. So much for not wetting my hair. I turned the other dial only to find water sprayed out the wall, making me shriek when I suddenly pelted with a force that water shouldn't come out and it was freezing cold. I tried to shut it off when music started blaring from somewhere. What? The bathroom suddenly turned into a rave and I was being waterboarded while I was filling with water. Was this karma? Did I break a mirror or something? I tried covering my ears over the horrid radio blasting from God knows where, while trying to shield my eyes as I spun the dials trying to shut it off. Marin? How do you turn it off? I screamed. The blue dial, I can't see a blue dial, your dial is broken, I shriek at him when another jet of water suddenly comes from the roof. I shield my head and I forgetting the ears, I would go deaf but I can't take any more. I felt like I was in a car wash, not a shower. Suddenly the water cuts off and I hear laughing. Scrubbing my hands down my face, I blink, my eyeballs aching. Off, Lucian said, pointing to one dial. On, and that one is pressure, he says, pointing to the third dial while laughing. You couldn't have a normal functioning shower. I snap while choking on water. Maybe yours are dated, I feels like it just got blasted to the shtmun, who in their right mind wants an blaster in the shower, Lucian chuckles looking down before I realized while I was drowning and choking on the water. A shriek left my lips as I shoved past him to grab a towel to cover up. Wet tiles and my coordination were not a good mix tonight as I collided with him, taking both of us out. Lucian tried to grab me but I was done for. Lucian wheezes as I go up before landing on the floor on top of him. I felt like this was some sort of setup and I was being punked, surely this couldn't get any more awkward. I was so wrong when I realized I was looking at his feet, which meant I was on top of him. How? Just how? You really did get blasted? Lucian chuckles. Please, moon goddess, strike me down and put me out of my misery. I scramble off, and there was no ladylike way I could have avoided him seeing me when now he had an internal view, not even my GYN0 got that close and personal with my never regions. Good to know you, Wax, Lucian adds, his commentary was not necessary. If only he saw it 2 weeks ago, it looked like the jungle, with my winter fur coat. I was foul when I got that call saying I was 3 years past my last pap smear. Thank God, I was, or he would have been coughing up a hairball. I snatched the towel off the basin, covering myself, trying to keep some dignity even though I was pretty sure most of went down the drain along with my ability to speak. I cleared my throat. Do you want me to fix the shower? I nod and hum, looking anywhere but at him. He snickers, trying to contain himself as he turned it on for me. He then takes his shirt off, motioning toward the shower. I have already seen you, so no point hiding from now, Marin, he chuckles before shedding his pants and stepping in. Get in the shower, Marin, we are even now, I have seen yours and you have seen mine. I was just a bit more polite and didn't chuck my genitals on your face." Lucian snickers, and I growl at him. I made sure to keep my eyes on him before he raises an eyebrow at me. I rolled my eyes, but he was right, nothing much more he could see, so I dropped the towel and hopped in. Chapter 53. Can you not stare? I snapped at Lucian. His roaming gaze made me self-conscious. My body was not what he would be used to, my stomach wasn't flat. My body was ruined from carrying Valerian. While he stood looking like he just stepped out of a sports magazine, all hard chiseled muscle and tan complexion, while my skin was pale in comparison, and I looked frumpy. "Does my staring bother you?" Yeah. I wouldn't have said it if it didn't," I tell him, turning away from him. "You have had a baby, that doesn't make you look any less appealing, Marin, so don't shy away from me now," he says, putting his head under the shower spray to rinse the shampoo from his hair. Easy for him to say, I don't have exes for him to compare himself against. Whereas I have seen the girls in the papers that he kept on his arm, even met one of them. As if I wouldn't feel inadequate compared to their perky fit bodies while I looked like used goods. I quickly washed before hopping out and wrapping a towel around myself. Lucian leisurely moved about as he got out, uncaring that he was standing around in front of me, but unlike him, I averted my gaze instead of gawking and kept my eyes strictly above his pecs. I yanked his shirt over my head before undoing the towel when I realized the pants were gone. When I tried to leave the bathroom, Lucian stepped into my path. Moving the other way, he did the same thing. Trying to escape me? "Lucian, I am tired, please. I don't want to play these stupid games." "Just move aside," I tell him. "Always so serious, and you are always annoying me." "Please move." "I will, but you have to sleep in the bed with me." I shake my head, and he folds his arms across his chest and looks down at me. "No, fine, we will sleep here then," he shrugs before leaning against the door and with a devious smile on his lips, and I glared at him. "Fine, but I want the bathtub." "You can have the floor," I huffed before turning around and walking over to it. Somehow I don't think his OCD would cope with sleeping on the wet floor. "Are you really that BL00DY stubborn?" Lucian asked. "Yep," I tell him, popping the pee. Lucian growled behind me, and I climbed into the bathtub. I have slept in worse places, but I know he hasn't. He would not last long. "Marin." "Lucian," I retorted. His growl bounced off the tiled walls before he suddenly yanked me out of the tub. "Good thing I am also stubborn. Would you look at that, we have something in common, and you are sleeping with me," Lucian growled while I struggled to get out of his grip. "Lucian," I snapped. My fists hit his chest as he tried to pull me from the tub. He laughed before tossing me over his shoulder. I binged on his back before digging my elbows into it. You can imagine Valerian's little face when he finds you in my bed instead of on the couch. That is guilt-tripping and you know it. Don't use our son to get what you want. What I want is for my mate to sleep in the same bed as me. I never said I would try to sleep with you, but your squirming is making it rather difficult. I dug my elbows in deeper and his back arched as he walked up the hall toward his room. He pushed his bedroom door open with his foot, and I growled at him. "Do I need to find something to tie you down with, or will you behave?" "Do that, and you will want to sleep with a towel wrapped around your neck." "Why would I want to do that?" "To stop me from cutting it while you sleep," I snap at him. "Then I am definitely tying you to the bed," I growled, my legs and arms flailing before I stopped and growled at him. "Fine, but I am the big spoon," I tell him. "Are you trying to ruin my masculinity? Take it or leave it," I tell him before I am dumped on the bed. A squeak left my lips at the motion, and I growled while he chuckled at me. Fine, you can be the big spoon, Lucian growled as he climbed on the bed. He tugged the covers back before climbing underneath them. I was happy to just share the bed with you, but hey, if you want to hug me, I will take it, Lucian tells me, and I rolled my eyes at him but climbed underneath his blankets. Gosh, his bed was comfortable, like a cloud, and I would never ever agree to take the couch again. I realized how uncomfortable my bed was, which I used to believe was comfortable. I was pretty certain he just ruined my bed for me now. Ah, and his scent made me want to roll around in it, not that I did. I have some control, but I suddenly never wanted to leave his bed. Ah, are you forgetting something? What about spooning me? Lucian laughed. I'm too comfortable to move now, hug yourself, I yawned before feeling the bed shift under his weight. Lucian pushed my shoulder, wanting me to roll on my side, but I was actually considering biting him for moving me. Although the warmth he offered made me shut up and wiggle back against him. I prefer being the big spoon, he said, snuggling against me. He shrieked when I jammed my freezing cold feet between his thighs. How can your feet be cold when you just had a shower? He growled, and I snickered. If you want to be the big spoon, you also get to be my feet warmer. His chest vibrated against my back with his growl, but he didn't move, instead pressed closer, and I succumbed quickly to sleep. The sound of my phone ringing in the living room woke me. Lucian groaned behind me, and I blinked around at the room to find it still dark but could see the sliver of light peeking out the sides of the thick block-out CS. Turn it off, Lucian snarled while pressing his face into the back of my neck. I yawned about to toss the blankets back and climb out to retrieve my phone when I realized the tune playing wasn't my alarm but my ringtone. The noise cuts off mid-tune. Thank God, Lucian mumbled when it started blaring again, and I sat upright. Valerian's voice reached my ears. Hey, Auntie Macy, Valerian said from the living room. I peeked over at the bedside table to see Lucian's phone on charge and I moved out of his grip to snatch it. I pressed the power button, and the screen lit up, telling me it was midday. A gasp escaped me and I lurched upright. Lucian, get up. We slept in, I snapped at him before hitting his shoulder just as I heard Valerian's footsteps run up the hall toward the bedroom. The door opens further. Mum, Auntie Macy said she needs to speak to you about Zoe. She is crying, Valerian said while holding the phone out. I took it, placing it to my ear. Hey, I am sorry I am late. Why haven't you been answering your phone? Amber and Mitcha just rang Zoe and said they are on their way to get Casey. What? I said, jumping out of bed. I raced to Lucian's dresser and opened drawers before grabbing the first set of pants I laid my hands on. I ripped them up legs. I am not at the hotel, Zoe rang me hysterical. I am stuck at the morgue. I need you to get to her, Macy sobbed, and I nodded. I'm on my way. Wait, why are you at the morgue? They think they found Emily. An officer picked me up to identify her son. I have no idea. Get to Zoe, Macy said, hanging up. My head spun, and Valerian stared up at me worriedly. Is Auntie Zoe all right? I didn't want to wake you, I'm sorry, Valerian cried and Lucian looked around confused. It's not your fault, but I need to go. She will be fine, I told him. What's going on? He yawned. I need your keys, I have to get back to the hotel, I tell him. Stay with your father. I will be back when I can, I told Valerian before rushing out the door. I snatch his keys off the bench and herald for the door just as Lucian came out carrying our crying son. Marin, what's going on? Mitcha mate found out about Casey. Zoe needs me over at the hotel, is everything alright? I looked at Valerian, not wanting to say much in front of him, especially since I didn't exactly know what was going on. All I knew was I let Zoe down. I should have gone home and told her last night what Officer Richard said. I will send Dante to meet you, go. I will meet you over there, I nodded and rushed toward the front door. Chapter 54. As I jerked to a stop in the staff car park, the scene unfolding before my eyes made my blood boil. As Mitcha tried to yank her away from Zoe, Casey clutched her mother's clothes and wailed. Staff members attempted to separate them, and I tossed my door open and got out. Mitcha, what? I snapped at him. Zoe looked up, and I rushed over to her side, shoving her behind me and getting between them. Take Casey inside, I told her when I noticed a woman come stomping over in a rage. Her blonde hair hung loosely in waves and her face made up looking like she was about to step into a photo shoot. She looked every part the perfect housewife until she opened up her mouth. Mitcha, grab the kid and let's go, she snapped. Amber, get back in the car, Mitcha groaned, turning to face his mate. I pushed Zoe toward the doors of the hotel. Before looking at some of my staff. Where is security? The perimeter was breached. They are fixing the fence and out of radio range, one of them told me. I cursed under my breath. I will. She stole my baby. I should be the only person having your kid Mitcha. Now get Casey, and let's leave. She is a rogue. Just knock the dumb out. No one will care, and your father will get you off anyway. Mitcha scrubbed a hand down his face, and I could tell he didn't want any of this happening, but Amber was a nut job and also his mate. She was always loud and outgoing at school, but I was shocked to see how cold-hearted she was now. Mitcha turned to look at me and I glared at him. I'm sorry Marin, step aside. I want my daughter, want your daughter? Where were you for all these years, coming and going as you pleased? Casey barely even knows you, regardless, she is still mine, he says, trying to shove past me. Wait, Marin? Is that you? Amber said, finally looking in my direction. I glared at her. Is you? Everyone wondered what happened to you? Your father said you ran away, she gushed with tears in her eyes. Is this bimbo for real right now? She tried to embrace me, but I stepped away from her. Marin. Amber said. I can't believe she dared to look her in the situation. Leave both of you, or I will be forced to call the police, I tell them when Mitcha made a run for the door and jerked Zoe back by the back of her shirt. She smashed against the ground before he grabbed Casey, and I moved to her holding her arm. Let her go Mitcha, I snarled. This has nothing to do with you Marin, now stand down, I will now let her go. I yelled, and he let go. He appeared shocked, and so was one. My aura rushed out, and he paled, taking a step back from me, but it wore off quickly, and he snarled that I commanded him before he lunged at me. I shoved Casey toward Zoe just as he knocked me down on the ground. Command me, who do you think you are? He sp'd, trying to pin me when my head smashed onto the concrete. I saw stars for a second, my vision going black and I heard Zoe scream before hearing a scuffle. My surroundings blurred when he was suddenly gone from on top of me. Ember's blood-curdling scream made my heart thud thinking it was Casey or Zoe that got hurt when I heard the sound of flesh on flesh. I turned my head to see Dante stand upright from pummeling Mitcha, who was curled in the fetal position on the floor. Zoe, Casey. I gasped as Amber rushed toward Mitcha on the ground. Dante snarled, which made me look back at him as I got to my feet. My head was pounding and I could hear sirens in the distance heading our way. But I was too distracted by the look on Dante's confused face. He turned his head to the side, slightly looking around me, and I followed his gaze to see Zoe looking white as a sheet of paper, her eyes wide, and I rushed to her side and gripped her arms and shook her. Zoe? Zoe? Dante repeated behind me, and her eyes were locked on his. I peeked over my shoulder at him. Casey's mum, right? Dante asked her and Zoe nodded. I was seriously worried she was about to pass out with how clammy her skin went. Dante yanked Mitcha to his feet by the front of his shin. Amber squealed and ripped at his shin. So you must be the father. Mitcha nodded just as Dante head-butted him. The sound of his nose breaking made me flinch, and blood spurted out when Dante's fist connected with his jaw. Dante let him go, and he fell to the ground in a heap just as Zoe fainted. Casey shrieked, and I only just caught her as she fell forward into me. Tires screeched to a stop as cop cars pulled up everywhere and Officer Richards jumped from the first vehicle. Dante growled, and he backed up with his hand on his gun. Pull it, and I will end him, Richard. What will be? Dante growled at him. His entire body trembled as he fought the urge to shift and I looked back at the terrified Officer Richards who looked at his bleeding son on the ground at Dante's feet. Amber sobbed over the top of him. Whatever he did, I will see it is fixed, Officer Richard murmured with his hands up. Good, make sure he stays away from my mate, Dante snarled before stalking toward me. He grabbed Zoe, scooping her up in his arms while I stared dumbfounded. It now made so much sense. How did I not see that? I spent hours in the washing liquid aisle trying to find that scent, not proud to say it, but I even tasted a few, and all I had to was follow your daughter home, Dante said to an unconscious Zoe. Wait, Zoe is your mate? Officer Richards asked, just as shocked. Dante growled at him before holding out his hand to Casey, who looked up at him, his shirt drenched in her father's blood. Come on, princess, let's take mummy inside, Dante said to her. She looked over at me, and I nodded for her to go with him and was about to check on Mitcha when Dante called out to me. You to Marin, leave the Lucian is on his way, Dante said as he walked toward the hotel doors. I rushed ahead of him and opened up the door for him when he stopped and looked back at Officer Richards who was fussing over his son. I suggest you get him out of here, Richard. I left him breathing. Lucian won't for touching his Luna, Dante told him. Officer Richard motioned some of his men over, who were all staring at me oddly. Luna? But she is a rogue, Amber blurted out. Shut it, you over-opinionated mutt, Officer Richard snapped at his daughter-in-law. My eyebrows raised at his words and two of the other officers rushed over peeled Mitcha off the ground, who groaned in pain. You have done it now, boy, Officer Richard snapped at him. Ah, Marin, Dante called as he nodded toward the next door leading out the back of the restaurant. I shut the door and rushed over to him just as I did. Zoe came too, and projectile vomited all over the front of him. Well, not the reaction I was hoping for, but still it's a reaction, Dante said while Zoe stared wide-eyed at him. You're my mate, offered Dante, and she nodded like she thought he was a figment of her imagination. I was beginning to wonder if this whole scenario was a figment of mine too. And I just spewed on you, Zoe squeaked. Dante looked down at the font of his shirt. He shrugged. At least I can help you shower. Dante chuckled. Zoe nodded, looking at him like a deer stuck in headlights. You can't shower with her. You will see her privates, Casey said, and I completely forgot she was there. Great observations, Marin, deserve a pat on the back, I thought sarcastically. Oh right, we will shower with our clothes on, can't have that, Dante agreed with her. Casey nodded her head, accepting that answer. Want to see where we live? I have all the Trolls movies, and they have a TV show. Valerian doesn't like to watch with me, but you can, Casey said, tugging on his arm and leading him out. I followed them. My head was throbbing, and once inside, I flopped on the couch and called Casey over to me while Dante went and helped clean Zoe up. Casey rummaged through her movies, placing Trolls on, and I rested my head back on the couch and rubbed my temples. Auntie Marin, is my dad going to jail? I'm not sure, sweetie. Are you upset? No, I don't want to go with that lady. They tried to take me from school, Mum drove really fast on the way home, and that crazy woman drove into the side of Mum's car in the parking lot. She what? Casey nodded, pressing play. Yep, the school went into lockdown. She said she was my mum, but I already have a mum. The school locked me in a cleaning closet until Mum got there and security dragged them away, but then they chased us. No one is taking you from your mother, I promise, I told her, holding up my finger. I would sell the SHT hotel to pay for the legal bills if needed, but I doubted it would come to that now. Casey nodded and gripped my pinky. Why wasn't Valerian at school? We slept in, I told her just as the door burst open and Macy rushed in. Oh, Macy said, running in and scooping up Casey. She hugged her tight. Where is Zoe? Whoa, what happened to you? Macy said, looking at me. Hey? You have a huge egg on your head, Macy shrieked, and I felt my head before touching the back and wincing. Pulling my hand back, blood stained my fingertips. Great, that's all I need. Chapter 55. My head throbbed even more as Macy watched me with worry, and she came over to me and prodded the bump on my head with her finger, which only made it hurt more with her attempt to examine it. It's oh my bleeding a little, I bet it hurts, she said, poking it again. I laughed, which caused me to clutch my head in pain. Ah, yeah, because you keep poking it, I responded. Sorry, she chuckled and stopped. Maybe you should shift, it may help heal it a little quicker. Macy offered. That was the last thing I wanted to do. It always seemed like too much effort these days to shift, and I hated my wolf form, it made me feel weak. I tired quickly and didn't want to spend the rest of the day like a zombie because I shifted for a meager bump to the head. Maybe later, we still have heaps of work today, oh the morgue. Was it Emily? I asked her. With everything going on, I forgot to ask her. No, it was some homeless woman. She must have stolen some of Emily's clothes. I recognized the tie-dyed shin, but it wasn't her, Macy told me, and I let out a breath of relief. Thank the heavens! However, it still left me wondering what happened to her and what was happening in this city. So many people were missing, and I was beginning to worry something bigger was going on that we weren't aware of or grasping fully. Murders were rare, disappearances rarer in this city, yet multiple have happened in the last few weeks. More problematic was the amount of Forsaken trying to get into the city. What were they running from? They mostly stayed away. Lately, there have been repeated attempts to breach the city's borders. Also, even the Forsaken that had been tagged and tracked had gone missing without a trace. What are you thinking? Macy asked, sitting down on the couch beside me. I shook my head, I had no idea what to think. These days, it seemed like it was drama after drama. I looked at her about to answer when both Macy and I tensed. Both of us looked in the hallway's direction. Macy's head turned to me before she covered Casey's ears and mouthed. Are they? she nodded toward the hall. My lips pressed together in a line as I listened to the noises down the hall, trying not to laugh. Casey, none the wiser, looked at us. How about ice cream? Let's get ice cream, Macy said, scooping up Casey. But I wanted to show Dante the Trolls movie, Casey complained before jutting out her bottom lip as she pouted. The noises became slightly more audible, and Macy hurried to the door before she stopped and glanced at me. Tell Zoe I have Casey, she exclaimed, rushing out the door before I could protest. Why do I have to tell her? I groaned and got to my feet before making my way down the hall. I tapped on the door and heard things that would haunt my memory. Zoe was like mine and Macy's little sister, and there were some things we just didn't want the mental image of. And this was one of those things, especially when she made those sons of noises. I blanched. I cleared my throat and knocked again. Ah, Zoe, Macy has Casey while you she just has Casey, I told her before rushing away and out of my apartment. Safely outside, I made my way back to the main building and headed toward the restaurant. I had just stepped inside when the door leading in from the front burst open, and Lucian stepped inside looking furious. His eyes scanned around the place before they fell on me and the relief on his face was clear. I'm fine, I said with a wave of my hand as he rushed over to me. A few late stragglers had come in for a late lunch and peered over at us, and I smacked Lucian's hand away as he reached out to me. He went to say something before he noticed we had an audience in here, and we were prime entertainment. What happened? Lucian asked. He grabbed my elbow as he led me out of the restaurant and down the hall toward my office. I spotted Casey and Macy in the creche with bowls of ice cream. Casey waved as we passed the glass window, and I smiled and waved back. It's handled, Lucian. Dante handled it. Mitcha and Amber came and tried to take Casey. I got knocked over, and I am fine, I told him as he stuffed me through my office door. Dante said you were hurt, he said while examining me over while I rolled my eyes. I am not a child. You don't need to check me and kiss away my pains, I growled as he poked and prodded me. Wait, where is Valerian? With my father, I called him over to watch him for me, I sighed. He is a good father, Marin, you don't need to worry about my father. I trust him with our son, Lucian told me. Giving Callan the benefit of the doubt, I let it go. He had never shown signs he was a threat to our son and also told me he wanted to be part of his life. And where is Mitcha now? Lucian asked. His father took him away. It's sorted, just leave it be. I won't do that. Mitcha is part of my pack, and he will be punished. Punished how, Lucian? You can't go K*G people over a dispute. He hurt you, Lucian snarled. I am fine, but you may have to speak to Mitcha about keeping his mouth shut and Amber because they are aware we are mates now. Dante hammered him pretty good, I don't think he needs another beating. Wait, where is Dante? Lucian asked, only now recognizing he wasn't with me. I laughed and cupped my mouth, and Lucian stared at me. What? Zoe and Dante are mates, I chuckled. His eyebrows almost disappeared into his hairline before a thoughtful expression crossed his face. Hey, now that explains the sniffing, he murmured. That makes so much sense. How did I not figure that out? He said. I thought the exact same thing, both of their weird behavior made it even more apparent that they were mates while poor Casey was stuck in the middle of their sniffest. I chuckled, making my head ache worse, and I winced before walking to my desk in search of painkillers. Lucian gripped my hand when I pulled out the packet of paracetamol. You said you weren't hurt, he growled. I bumped my head, just a headache, I told him, snatching my hand out of his grip. Lucian stared at me before a growl escaped him, and he started prodding the bump on the back of my head. I'll kill him, he snapped, storming out of the room before I could stop him. Wait, Lucian! Just leave it be, I shrieked, chasing after him as he made his way outside to his car. His car beeped as he unlocked the doors before tossing the doors open, and I raced to the other side. Lucian, stop! Let it go, I said, climbing in the passenger side. Get out, Lucian growled. Fur was growing along his arms as he fought to remain in his human form. His eyes flickered with his rage, and canines protruded. No. Marianne. No, Lucian. Either I come with you, or you don't go. Marianne. Lucian snapped, and I raised an eyebrow at him. I won't let you hurt him or do something you can't undo. It was a dispute, that is over now, and no one needs to d*e over a bumped head, I told him. Lucian's claws slipped from his nail beds, he clenched his fists on the steering wheel. He went to say something else, and I glared at him. Mitcha is Casey's father. He may be a one, but he is still her father. You hurt him, and it could upset her, so no. You will not touch him or whatever it is you were planning on doing, I snapped at him. Lucian seemed shocked by my outburst, but retaliating would only worsen things. And Zoe didn't need the added drama when she was about to enter a custody battle against him. This would just add more fuel to the fire. You can't expect me to do nothing, that's exactly what I expect. The issue is over. Officer Richards looked like he was going to give him hell anyway over the drama he caused. He seemed genuinely embarrassed over his son's actions and no doubt would deal with him, as his alpha. I can't let it slide when he hurt my mate, Lucian snarled. And as his Luna, I won't allow you to kill him, I retorted, and he seemed taken aback by my words. Are you trying to pull rank over me? He scoffed. Not trying, I am. If you hurt him, Lucian, it will just cause more issues. I don't want the pack hating me before I even join it. Mitcha and his father are well respected in your pack and this city. I sure don't want to walk in, disturbing the peace straight away, just because he hurt me before he realized who I was, I tell him. Lucian seemed to calm down and folded his arms across his chest, turning slightly to look at me. So you are my Luna? Shut up, and take me to my son, I told him. He didn't start the car. Instead, Lucian continued to stare at me while I stared out the window, trying to ignore his gaze. I can't believe you are trying to pull rank over me, and you haven't even let me mark you yet, he chuckled. I folded my arms across my chest and turned to my head to look at him. So what will it be, Aifa? I asked, and he clicked his tongue and shook his head, muttering under his breath. Oh, so now we are turning to blackmail. He chuckled. Yep, you want a Luna, I don't want blood on my hands. Technically, his blood would be on my hands, not yours. I wouldn't want you to break a nail, Lucian taunted. Broken nails never fazed me, but you make things worse, and I may just have to change my mind on this entire Luna business, I tell him. Is that so? Yep, I tell him. He scratched his chin. It's not up for discussion, I told him when he opened up his mouth to argue. What about a compromise? That would make it up for discussion, he chuckled and shrugged. I won't hurt him, he growled the last part out, clearly not liking it. If. I stared at him, and he smirked before a smile split on his face. If what? I asked, glaring over at him, knowing he would ask for something that he knew I wouldn't want to agree to. You give me a kiss, you want a kiss? Yep, That's my deal. Take it or leave it. What, right now, here? I asked, looking around and praying for an excuse that someone was around. I found nobody. One kiss. I told him and he smiled triumphantly. One kiss, he repeated. I pressed my lips in a line and glared at him. He laughed and mid-laugh, I leaned over and pecked his lips before sitting back in my seat. They're done, I chuckled. Ah, that's not what I meant by a kiss. A kiss is a kiss, I told him. That is not what I meant, and you know it, I have kissed my father better than that. He growled. You kiss your father? That came out wrong. I meant on the cheek, in greeting, not a romantic way. I laughed. What, you don't kiss people? He asked. Well, I don't kiss my father, that's for sure, I said. Stop it, you know what I meant, Lucian said, becoming embarrassed at his word vomit. It was strange to feel him through the bond, although I liked that he was the one who was embarrassed for once. I know what you meant, and I think it is sweet that you give good old dad a peck on the cheek. Bet that makes him happy that you haven't outgrown your father's love, I tell him. I didn't want him to think I thought it weird. It was totally acceptable. It just shocked me that he was that close to his father. Although neither of them appeared too affectionate, Lucian was always happy to receive and give our son hugs and affection. It made me think of my father when I was still his daughter, not his biggest shame. He, too, was a good father and never turned our affections away until I got pregnant and went from daddy's little girl to daddy's rogue daughter. But I was glad he had a strong relationship with his father. That would never be a bad thing. Though it made the entire Valerie mess more upsetting, knowing how much it would hurt Lucian to know his father lied to him all these years. So about this kiss you cheated me out of? Lucian chuckled. I did not cheat you. You cheated yourself, I told Lucian as I motioned for him to start the car. I kissed you. It's done, now let's go. I need to get back to do some work, I told him. Fine, but you owe me a kiss still, and a proper one, Lucian taunted while starting the car. And I will make you pay up, he added as he reversed out. I chuckled and shook my head at his words. Chapter 56. We drove through the city, but when Lucian didn't turn onto his territory, I glanced over at him. Wondering where we were going when he stopped at the police station on the city's main drag. You're doing this now? I asked as he unclipped his seat belt. Yes, Officer Richards mind-linked and said his son and Amber are still here. I told him to hold them until I got here, Lucian said before getting out of the car. I rushed to unclip my seatbelt and jumped out, and he started walking up the steps. My heart raced in my chest at the thought of what he would do. You said you wouldn't hurt him, I gushed, racing after him and gripping his arm. He kept walking into the building, and some officers opened the door for him as they came out. They tipped their hats to him and continued to their patrol cars. I shook my head and looked at Lucian. I said I won't, though I want to. But Amber is Pan of your father's pack, and Mitcha is joining it. So if you want her to keep her mouth shut, I need to speak to them and Officer Richards. Lucian explained, and I sighed a breath of relief. Lucian didn't bother speaking to anyone, he just navigated his way around like he owned the place. He probably did, I wouldn't put anything out of his price range. When we came to a locked-off area, Lucian tapped on the perspex window, and the officer, who looked half asleep, jolted upright in his seat, nearly falling out of it. He quickly reached over and hit a button, and Lucian opened the door and held it open for me. He then grabbed my hand, leading me down the long corridor before I came to some holding cells. Officer Richard leaned against one, and he stood straighter as Lucian entered, baring his neck to Lucian. Amber sat in the chair behind a desk and glared at me. Lucian growled at her, and she dropped her head quickly. Aoife, I have spoken to him, and he has reassured me it won't happen again, Officer Richard said while shooting a glare at Amber. No, it won't. I want them both kept here until after the Alpha meeting, Lucian said before turning to Amber. And in cells, he said. Officer Richards nodded to two men, and Amber jumped up and shrieked. The noise hurt my ears as they grabbed her. They dragged her kicking and screaming toward the cell Mitcha was placed in while she chucked a full-blown tantrum worse than a toddler. Lucian growled and stepped toward them before gripping her face. You can't command me. You are not my alpha, she sneered, and I could see his rage as his entire body trembled and the back of his shin ripped as he tried not to shift. Her eyes widened with fear and I swallowed, actually feeling bad for her despite the trouble she caused. Be glad I'm not, because if I was, I would have stripped you of your title. But your mate is one of my men, and if you don't get your ass in that cell, the only place you will see him is in the Forsaken territory, Lucian snarled at her. She gasped, and her eyes flicked to Mitcha in H0RR0R. He shoved her face away, and the officers let her go. Officer Richards opened the cell, and she turned her nose up and walked in as if she wasn't just humiliated or embarrassed herself while acting like a fool. Lucian turned toward the cell where Mitcha was. He was bruised but mostly healed from the beating he received from Dante. Mitcha cowered when Lucian turned his icy glare on him. Lucian's shirt was torn, and his skin rippled as he tried to contain himself. Consider yourself lucky, Mitcha, that your Luna is forgiving. You and I both know I am not. The only reason you are still breathing is because of her, so do you have anything to say? Lucian asked him. Mitcha turned his head toward me, stuttered out an apology, and thanked me for sparing him. I just stared in disbelief. Now, either of you speaks one word of Marin being my mate to anyone. You and your entire families will be considered a traitor and made forsaken, am I clear? Amber looked at me but nodded her head. Take their phones and print off the custody forms, custody forms. Amber asked, standing up. Mitcha growled at her, and Officer Richards glared at her. Yes, Mitcha will sign all parental rights to Zoe for Casey and drop the custody battle. I expect all relevant documentation to be filled out, signed, and filed when I return after the Alpha meeting. After the Alpha meeting, I am meant to be attending. Tell your father you have food poisoning. I don't care, but neither of you will leave this cell until after. If I hear one whisper around this city that Marin is my mate, both of you will no longer live in this city, Lucian said, before turning to me. Officer Richard cleared his throat, and Lucian looked at him. Alpha, if Mitcha signs all rights away, does that mean my wife and I can't see her either? It would break my wife's heart, Alpha. I never said he couldn't see her, but I want it all legal, so he can't take her from Zoe. If Zoe allows it, I don't see an issue with any of you remaining part of Casey's life, and that goes for Mitcha. If those papers aren't signed and sent off, and a copy waiting when I return, I will send your son rogue, and he will leave my city. That's if I don't decide to kill him, Lucian warned him. The relevant documents will be here when you return, Alpha. Thank you, Officer Richard said, before glaring at his son and Amber. The other officers bared their necks, and Lucian nodded before tugging me out of the room and back down the corridor. Would you really make them forsaken? I asked once back in the car. Yes, and yes, I would have killed him if you didn't make me promise not to, Lucian answered. He tugged off his torn shirt and tossed it in the back, before pulling away from the curb. Are we going to get Valerian now? Lucian nodded, but by the stern steel gaze he had out the window, and the burning rage I felt through the bond, I knew he was fighting with himself not to go back and tear Mitya apart. Just as we were about to turn up the street toward Lucian's place, my phone rang. Macy's name popped up on the screen, and I quickly answered it. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.